to look at ourselves in the mirror and ask ourselves, are we doing everything we can to be the best that we can be? And are we doing everything we can to recognize the opportunity to turn that passion into a reality? Well, a few months ago, I had the distinct privilege of having lunch with the Dalai Lama. And it was quite amazing, I must say, a definite bucket list for any of you here that choose to desire to do that. But he said, as he was espousing one of his many pearls of wisdom, there was one that struck particularly close to home. And he said that true passion and emotion can often cloud reality. Well, nowhere can that ever be exemplified in a better case than back in 1989 when my father decided to buy the Dallas Cowboys. And I will say at that time he was surrounded by a team full of attorneys and advisors and financial advisors, and they were all telling him not to do the deal. Because you see, at that time, the Dallas Cowboys were losing $75,000 a day, $1 million a month. The team was 3-13 with no chance of a winning season coming up. And on top of that, 13% of the Dallas Cowboys was owned by the FDIC. They truly were America's team. But despite the crazy reality of that deal, my dad had a burning desire to be a part of the NFL. And he'd always dreamed about being involved in professional football. And now here he had the opportunity to not only be involved in the NFL, but to be a part of the Dallas Cowboys. Well, there was no reality that was going to stand in his way. So he agreed on a handshake with Bud Bright to buy the Dallas Cowboys. Now, his attorney thought he was crazy because no way can you agree to that kind of deal with those and all those issues lined up and points to be agreed upon on a handshake. And they said, you just can't do this. And he said, it's too bad. I shook his hand. I'm the Dallas Cowboys. And he said, the next day, he brought in Jimmy Johnson. The next day, they had a press conference that announced Jerry Jones as the owner and Jimmy Johnson as the new head coach, and off they went. Well, a few weeks went by, and his attorney called and he said, Jerry, he said, you know, we really haven't been able to make any progress with Bud's attorneys. They're not giving on any of these points. You technically do not own the Dallas Cowboys. He said, I think you need to go meet with Bud. Well, immediately he set up a meeting. He went across town, went into his office, and walked in, and Bud was sitting there behind his desk. And he said, now, Bud, I know we agreed to this on a handshake. He said, but I also assumed that your attorneys and mine would get together and work out all the points of the deal. And your guys have not budged on anything. And he said, no, a deal's a deal. And he looked at it and he said, but really, you know, we're talking about millions of dollars here. He said, there's got to be a little, you know, wiggle room on both sides so we can agree. And he said, no, that's the deal. He said, but I'll tell you what I'll do. And he reached into his pocket and he pulled out a quarter. And he looked at Dad and he said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll flip you for it. And Jerry looked at him and said, flip me for it? For like the millions of dollars worth of points? And he said, yeah, heads. I win, you buy the Cowboys with all the points that I agree to. He said, and tails, you win, and I'll agree to every point you want me to. Jerry just looked at him, such a crazy. And he said, well, what if I don't agree? And Bud looked at him straight in the face and he said, looks like I have myself a new head coach. And I said, oh, okay, whatever. And so he flipped the coin, turned it over. Sure enough, it was his. Bud won. And as he took the coin off his hand and stuck it back in his pocket, he looked at Dad and he said, I guess you'll never know if that was a two-headed coin. And he just laughed and Dad was just ashy. And he walked out of the office and he just shook his head. Well, a couple of days later at the closing, they went to sign all the papers and Bud comes in and he has a present. And so he walks up to Jerry and said, I'd like for you to open it before we sign the documents. So inside the present was this framed quarter. And it was bedded so deep inside that granite around it that you couldn't pry it out to see the backside of it if you wanted. And below was a little tag. And it said, I guess you'll never know. And so Dad's attorney looked at me and patted her on the shoulder and he goes, man, Jerry, I'm really sorry you really lost that one, didn't you? And he goes, yeah, I lost that all right. And I own the Dallas Cowboys. You see, his crazy passion was not the only thing that caused him to buy the team. He also had a vision. And he dreamed that one day the Dallas Cowboys would return to their winning ways and the team would be successful again. Who would have ever dreamed that just 3 years later, the Cowboys would go on to win the next 3 out of 4 Super Bowls, and shortly thereafter would be recognized as the most valuable franchise in all of sport. You know, you see, it was Steve Jobs who said that it's passion that fuels the rocket, but it's vision that guides that rocket to its ultimate destination. Well, it was that same unbridled passion, coupled with a truly bold vision, that led our family to design and build Cowboy Stadium. We were presented, back in 2007, with an opportunity to build a football stadium. And we knew we could build a football stadium that would meet the needs of our fans and of our team and of our game. Or we had an opportunity to build a destination. We wanted to build a sports and entertainment destination that would attract fans beyond those of just sport. Our vision is to build an architectural icon that would be recognized and respected around the world for its modern technology, its design, its engineering, its capacity, and its contemporary art. We wanted to build an economic engine that would bring events into this community and into this region for years to come. So as we began our journey and to design this building, we drew upon inspiration from all around the world. And we started right here in the United States. We did a best practice study from all of our friends in the NFL, and yes, we have a few, who shared with us their best practices, the lessons that they had learned for building their stadium. And in addition to that, we took our studies overseas. We went to see Wembley Stadium. It was designed by Lord Norman Foster, who also designed the Windsor Opera House in downtown Dallas. And we went to Beijing to see the Bird's Nest. But we went beyond the world of sports, and we actually studied the Guggenheim. We studied Ian Pei's entrance to the Louvre. We studied the Sydney Opera House. We even studied great office buildings. We looked at the glass at the Nice airport. On the Bloomberg building, they have these little fasteners that are called spiders that hold the glass together. And we looked at those. And we also looked at great fashion houses and their flagship stations, from Chanel to Louis Vuitton and Monique Lhuillier. And all of these designs, as those tear sheets of designs and ideas started to mount, we began to formalize what the design of the stadium would be. And we knew then that we were about to build something that would leave our fans both awed, inspired, but most importantly, proud. But as it came time to actually unveil the design, we had had many budget talks, I can promise you that, with Dad about what we were going to spend on what item and where we wanted to be. But the one thing we had left out was the actual unveiling of the design. And so I went to him and I said, you know, you haven't really given me any guidance here about how much money I can spend on this. I said, can you help me out a little bit? And he said, no, I actually can't. I said, but I can tell you this. Never in your life will you have the opportunity to be a part of something as significant to the Cowboys, to the NFL, and to this region as building this stadium. And never will you have the opportunity to make a first impression on what this building is going to be. Give it what it deserves. Blank check. So I was so excited about producing this great event and what this design is going to be. And boy, we had this 3D fly-through, and it would take you all the way through the locker room, and then a player would appear, and all this cool, crazy technology, which was great. And we had videos that compared the ancient architecture from Rome and the Colosseum with contemporary design and all this greatness. And then we had legends from Cowboy lore with Roger Staubach and all of our Ring of Honor members there. And we even flew in Bob Costas to come and talk about how great the design would be. And that night went perfect. We had all the right people in the room from all across the country. We had the perfect media representation there, the perfect supporters of our community and beyond, and of course our family. And I'll never forget it. My parents were crying, everybody was cheering. I mean, it was such a great night. And even the media had their eyes like this, which was great. So the next day, I did something very uncharacteristic of myself, and I decided to turn the radio on and listen to Randy Galloway. Now, I don't know how many of you in this room are familiar with Randy Galloway, but let's just say he doesn't have a penchant for saying nice things about our family or our organization or our direction, but I just knew this day had to be different. There was no way he could not say something nice. So I turned on the radio, and sure enough, there it goes. And he was describing it just word for word, exactly the way we had planned it. And it was just great. And then he said, you know what? It was beyond my wildest imagination. And my heart sank. And I thought, oh my gosh, we had just raised the bar on ourselves. That for the next 2 years, people would have the opportunity to dream about what was beyond their wildest imagination. So in their own minds, they were already creating what this great structure might look like and what might come and what events might be here, and raising their level of expectation every day. Every time there was an article, every time anybody said something about it, there it went. So no longer was great good enough. So the concrete changed to stone, and the metal changed to glass, and the video board got bigger, and everything. We were just on this roll, and our budget went from, you don't want to hear this, from $700 million to $1.2 billion to build a facility. But people were excited, businesses were excited, people were buying suites, they were supporting, everybody was on the bandwagon, and they saw the vision of what this facility could bring to this area, and then bam, we landed right smack in the middle of the biggest recession our generation will ever be a part of. And there we were, 50 feet in the ground, spending $1 million a day, employing over 4,000 people a day. We had a decision to make. Did we hold back? Did we stop and wait for the economy to turn around? Did we scale back and bring it back down to a level that we felt like we could afford in a better way? Or did we forge ahead? And I'll never forget sitting there in the boardroom, and Dad looked at everybody and he said, there's no decision to be made here. We have promised people that we would deliver something beyond what they dreamed about, something that would help this region. They need it so bad, the economy needs it. We have a responsibility to everyone here. There's no question. We move ahead. And he looked at each one of us and he said, what are you looking at? Get to work. So we all jumped up and scattered, and I'm happy to say that 3 years later, as you referenced, Stan, we have been host to over 50 major events, from the NBA All-Star Game to Super Bowl 44, the Final Four coming up, high school, college, and of course Cowboys football. And also concerts, and we've had bowling, and we've had bull riding, and we've had boxing, and we've even had, we're about to have swimming. I mean, just imagine all these crazy things. And on top of that, we've had over 1 million people come through the doors of the stadium just to see it. 1 million people, so think about that. That's almost 2,000 people a day that have come into the region to come out to actually see the building. So including the events, we've had over 5 million people come in through the front doors of Cowboys Stadium, and over 1 billion people have seen it on TV. And I say that because you realize television is such an important part of what we do. Only 7% of NFL fans have actually even been in their stadium. 7%. The rest see it on television. So that's why you spend the extra money, for the wow factor. So the Al Michaels of the world and the Troy Aikmans of the world are talking about, you've got to come here, you have to see it for yourself. So if there's anything I've learned in the 20 years plus that I've been involved with the Dallas Cowboys, it's the power of the brand and the power of the star. Now, whether misplaced or not, the NFL enjoys an inordinate amount of visibility and popularity. They're the #1 most watched programming in all of television. And the Cowboys are the #1 most watched team in the NFL. And because of the 50 years of tradition, starting back with Tom Landry and Roger Staubach and Bob Lilly, that this success and this championship tradition and the magic that it creates and the visibility and the interest, that we can take that and put it to work for those who need it. That we can leverage our brand to help the Salvation Army. That we can actually do great things with all this visibility beyond what our game does for the community. Now, it's easy for me to say that I didn't create it. I've just had a chance to be a part of it for a while. But back in the early 90s, we really put that to task. And that's when we began our partnership with the Salvation Army. And as you may recall, that was kind of during our heyday. Winning Super Bowls and things were exciting, and boy, we were on the front page of every newspaper. Now that was back when television, newspaper, and radio was the only way to communicate. No Twitter, no email, none of all this modern technology that we had. So you truly had to be newsworthy, not just the Kardashians, to make the news. So here we were, though, having all this great success, and the players were great. And then one of our players decided to make an unfortunate decision, and that landed him across the country. And single-handedly, he impacted our brand, the players around him, our community, everybody with that one decision. But my father, as we sat there and looked at all these papers and all the stories that they were saying about him and about the Cowboys, typical Jerry, the glass is always half full, it's never half empty. He said, you know what? We've got an opportunity here. He said, we can take all this interest, and if they're going to write about that, then they can write about something good. He said, now, what we need to do is find a partner. He said, we've got to align our brand with another brand that's got to be national, if not international, in scale. And they have got to represent integrity. And we have to be able to trust them, because if we're going to bring all this media spotlight in on them, we got to be able to count on them. And the brand has to be strong, if not stronger, than our own. And he said, we need to be the Jerry Lewis of something. So go find it. And off we went. So a few weeks later, I found myself in another charitable organization's board meeting, and it was at the offices of Frito-Lay. And I sat in there, and I was representing my father, so it was really great, because everybody around me were presidents and heads of their companies, and there I was. And before the meeting started, Steve Lyman, who was the president of Frito-Lay, slid me a note, and the meeting began, and he dismissed himself halfway through the meeting. Well, I opened up the note and said, meet me in my office when you're finished. So the meeting adjourned, and I found my way to the elevator, and all I could think about, I was 26 years old, and I was a young, wasn't even a marketing executive. That word didn't even exist back then. I was in a little sponsorship run, whatever it was. But I was so excited, because my boss had been trying to get into the office of Frito-Lay for months to sell him a suite or a sponsorship or something, and he just wouldn't take his call. So here I was on my way, to his office and everything, and I thought, I'm not going to mess this up, here's my chance. So I sat down on the couch, and Steve looked at me and he said, could you tell me what is the largest service organization in the world? Okay, and I said, no, sir. And he said, could you tell me what organization helps more children than any other in our country? I said, no, sir. In the back of my mind, I'm thinking, 2 strikes. I've got one more chance to nail this answer. He's going to throw me out of his office. So he said, could you tell me what the Salvation Army does? I looked at him, and then I kind of smiled, and I said, it's a place where I take my old clothes. Not my shining moment. So anyway, he looked at me and he said, yeah, well, that's our problem. He said, you see, I serve as the national chairman of the advisory board for the Salvation Army. And he said, the Salvation Army, their biggest asset, their humility, is also their biggest challenge. They don't go around tooting their horn saying, look what I did, look how great I am. I need somebody to do it for them. And he said, I think you can help. I think the Cowboys can. So right there, I said, every year we have a game at Thanksgiving. And we could take that game, we know we're going to have it, it's on national television, and we can use that to partner with the Salvation Army. We said, that's great. That's when they launched their big fundraising campaign. You know, this will be awesome. I said, okay, well, give me a few days. Let me kind of think about this and see what we can do. So I headed out to my office and immediately picked up my phone and called my immediate boss. And I said, I just left Steve Rudman's office. He goes, good, did you sell him a suite? I said, no, sir. And I said, well, he goes, well, did you give me, sell me tickets? And I said, no, sir. He goes, well, did you give me a meeting? And I said, no, sir. He goes, what did you get? And I said, I just gave him our halftime. He hung up the phone. He was not too good. As soon as I got back to the office, I went around him and went to my dad. And I walked in and I said, I have found our partner. And as we began to plan, I immediately knew that we needed an entertainer, something that would attract everybody's attention. And Reba McEntire had become a good friend through our times with the Super Bowl. She had performed for us. So I flew to Nashville, asked her to jump on the bandwagon, and then we didn't know it was going to be aired. So she just was a huge supporter of the Salvation Army, wanted to help and wanted to do the right thing. So here we had created what we thought was a great little halftime. And I went to my dad and I said, you know what, we need to get our network friends to really help us here. I said, I need you to get me a meeting with, at the time, was Dick Ebersol, who was the chairman of NBC Sports. And he said, fine, I'll get you a meeting in New York. So he picks up the phone, sets the meeting, off we both go to New York. Well, that night in the hotel room, I'm sitting there and I'm kind of worried about the meeting, and I have beside me a cassette player and a cassette. And I'm sitting there thinking, okay, here's the music, and I'm working, you know, on all this deal. My dad walks in and he's like, what are you doing? And I said, you know, this is the presentation I'm working on. And he's looking at the cassette player, and he's looking at the cassette, and he goes, don't worry, I'll handle it. You know, and he walks out of the room. So the next day we're walking down Fifth Avenue, I'm carrying my cassette player, and we walk into 30 Rock and we go into Dick Ebersol's office. And boy, you know, we're at the top. And walk in and sit down on his couch, and he and Dad, you know, kind of exchange pleasantries, and then Dad goes, Charlotte has something to ask you. And he just threw it over to me, and I kind of looked at him and I'm like, well, and so then I started in, and I said, you know what, Thanksgiving is an incredible holiday. It's a time for us to all be so thankful for the family that we have, the things that we have, and it's an opportunity for us to reach out to those who are less fortunate. I said, I know your audience is thinking the same thing, and we can produce a show and talk about the Salvation Army and encourage people to reach into their heart and do something special. And he's just looking at me the whole time. And I said, you know, I would just love it if the guys in the booth, I said, you don't have anything else to do. You know, then he's like, what it is. And he's like, going, oh yeah, okay. And I said, but you can talk about this. I said, you know, just show us over your, you know, over their shoulder and talk about that. And so he said, He goes, I'll tell you what I'll do. He said, I'll air your whole show. He said, but I need you to do two things. I need you to go get an extension on the halftime. And I need to make sure that you produce a show that is worthy of network coverage. It has to be an A+ show. He said, if not, I'll cut away and go to commercial. He said, I also want you to know that no one has ever asked me for this before. Not the NFL, not some green little rookie like you. And he said, I've never been asked this. He said, but I'll do it for you. So we walked out of the office, the door shut, breaks my arm. Do you know what you just got? I said, yes, my halftime aired on TV. And he goes, no. He said, you just got $15 million worth of visibility for the Salvation Army. So on that day, in Steve Ryan's office, who would have known that the National Red Kettle campaign launch would be born, but so is our passion for the Salvation Army. Take a look.
We have such an appreciation for the work of the Salvation Army and the men and women who make up the Salvation Army. They find us.
I remember being a little kid, and I knew it was Christmas time when I saw the little kettles outside of everywhere I was going.
Well, Salvation Army is always at one time of need. They're a giving organization.
Anything to do with the Salvation Army is pretty cool. I've been, doing it since I was a kid with my mom. It's good to help out.
Cowboys Stadium. And now to kick off the 2010 National Red Kettle Campaign, three-time Grammy Award winner Keith Urban.
The Salvation Army pledges to do the most good with your donation. How? By serving over 64 million meals each year. That's equal to making lunch for the entire population of California and Texas combined. By serving nearly 30 million people in need. That's one person every second. Help the Salvation Army make Christmas possible for millions of children. You'll be doing the most good. You guys ready? Let's go.
Well, we did celebrate our 15th anniversary, kicking off the Red Kettle campaign, which was great. And we had Enrique and even Pitbull, which was very exciting. And we had over 40 million people watch that Thanksgiving Day halftime. And hopefully, he and others were able to inspire many millions around the country to give to the Salvation Army. You know, perhaps the greatest responsibility we have with the Dallas Cowboys is what we can do to help those in need. You know, we know that people won't buy tickets to see grace and mercy at work, and they're not going to fill the stands and cheer for acts of compassion, because compassion is not a spectator sport. Everyone has to play. You know, at the beginning of our season, our head coach, Jason Garrett, addressed our team and our organization and several thousand people that were at the stadium. And he said that the purpose of life is to live a purposeful life. Well, I think the Salvation Army personifies that. Because as we probably all are all too aware that the poverty level in our country is at an all-time high. 1 in 5 children in our community live below the poverty line. So what are we going to do about it? Well, we're going to help the Salvation Army because they are doing something about it. You know, they are serving on the front line for us in this war on poverty. This last year alone, Thanksgiving and Christmas would not have been possible for over 4.2 million people served by the Salvation Army. Over 30 million people throughout the year receive services from the Salvation Army. 1 person every second. The Salvation Army provided over 10 million nights of shelter to the homeless. The Salvation Army helped over 1 million disaster victims, providing food, shelter, and financial assistance in times of crisis, in immediate times of crisis. And they are there every day doing the work that none of the rest of us want to do. But that's the great thing about the Salvation Army. They are humble stewards of other people's generosity. They are feeding empty stomachs and hungry souls. They are the Salvation Army, and they are doing the most good to help those in the most need in our community. That's what we can do. We can spread the word about the Salvation Army. We can probably do the most important thing of all, and that's teach our kids about compassion. Teach them about the Salvation Army. Teach them that it's important to help someone else before you help yourself. You know, that's why I love sports so much, because it allows you to turn your passion into compassion. And it teaches us so many other things that we probably never even realize. It teaches us about teamwork and dedication, hard work and loyalty, respect and responsibility, intensity and integrity, persistence and perseverance. And it teaches us to celebrate our success and to learn from our failures. But it also teaches us about leadership and teamwork. You know, with sports, you're able to be around a lot of great leaders, which is probably the best thing about my job. But you know, in sports, you don't elect your leader. That leader leads by example that others choose to follow. Probably the best example I can give you of one of the most important leaders that I was able to be around in my career with the Cowboys was Troy Aikman. Well, on the field and by nature of his position, you might expect him to be a leader. First round draft pick, big strong arm, big strong guy, led his team to 3 out of 4 Super Bowls, commanded attention, but he also had all the intangibles. He was able to inspire a huddle full of some really big egos in Michael Irvin, Emmitt Smith, Daryl Johnston, all of whom wanted the ball. But he was able to inspire them and convince them to put aside their own personal gain for the benefit of the team. And he was the ultimate team player. Now they could be talking now about all these passing records that Troy set. But instead, Troy knew that in order for the Cowboys to be successful, that the best thing he could do was to give the ball to Emmitt behind a huge offensive line and run down the field and eat up the clock. And that's what they did. So his numbers may not look great, but he's one of the greatest leaders that there ever were. And also, he was a perfectionist. He demanded it on the practice field, and he would get in those guys' face and he would be all over them, and he expected every play to be run with perfection. But then he expected it when he got out on the playing field. I think Jay Novacek probably told the greatest story that really personifies that, and this was at Troy's retirement. And he said this was at a particular game at Texas Stadium, and we were playing for home field advantage for the playoffs, so the win was crucial. And they said they got back in the huddle, and Troy called a particular play, and it was Jay's number. So he ran his route to perfection, exactly like he was supposed to, and he turned back to look for Troy, and he couldn't find him. The pocket had collapsed, all he saw was defenders and arms, and he just knew the play was completely busted. And then from out of nowhere, here came the ball, and it landed perfectly on his fingertips. Jay makes the first down, run the clock out, game over, we got home field advantage. Jay goes into the locker room, and he goes up to Troy. He says, Troy, he said, there, on that one play, he said, you called my number, did exactly what you told me to do. He said, then I looked back to find you, and I couldn't see you. He said, I couldn't see you anywhere. I didn't know if you were on the ground, if you were under the defenders, or where you were. How did you see me? And Troy, in that oh-so-familiar stoic face, looked at him and he said, I never saw you. I just knew you'd be there. That's trust. Ultimate trust. Imagine if we had that kind of trust in those around us. The people that we work with, the people that work with us, like the Salvation Army, they trust that their community will support them so that they can help other people. Troy trusted his teammates and they trusted him. Imagine if we could put aside our own personal successes and let somebody else get the credit for them. Like the Salvation Army, when's the last time they stood up and said, I did it? Just imagine that. I want to leave you with this. Success requires trust, teamwork, passion, and vision. But it's great leadership that inspires a capable team to reach extraordinary heights, to turn that passion and vision into reality. Thank you.